Hello, dear America and China and Russia and all the countries. I'm referring to news articles and treatments, opinion articles, juxtaposed, celebrity opinions, multi-front, within as news organizations, and where and how our countries A through Z are recorded, states, areas, locations, forcing leaders to prevent, in collusion with themselves, used remotely, preventing people from demonstrating how science, honest and proper, has to show how positive and negative has a differential, a speciality relationship to a hyperconjunction that can only be discerned through where and how the invisible but still discernible, such as the subject and the predicate, as value/value progressions, as a nature of value that is inherent with what is greater than and more finite than its value as it, in relationship to hypercorrelation. So, for example, they have physical delusions with criminally foreign influence premises treatments as the value of opinion/convictions regarding uses of phrases like subconsciousness and or yin yang. See, when I first saw yin yang, it just looked like a symbol to me. You know, and then, but then when I found something in English, one identity of volume is demonstrably coming to/as itself, and coming to, from, as, with, and for itself, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, and hyper-simultaneously. So we have criminally legalized, since semi-ancient times, treatments of positive and negative to all locations, treatments of economies that left out what was/is actually discernible, which is that which is simultaneous, prevented voice, sickly distinctly, from that which is hyper-simultaneous, which again can only be discerned as the relationship that as a semi/complete relationship that everything that is invisible but still discernible has to itself, and to its identity of relationship to itself distinctly, non-distinctly, and to the value of that only increasingly, and demonstration of this. The importance of discerning the one identity as a scientific value, one identity of hyper-simultaneous nature. We can't make it, it's invisible but discernible. And even where that is discernible, it is required where we have to be attentive to all finite, means all individuals' voices at all locations of the species identity of volume. Individual grouped, as we are grouped, we can't help it. And as we are species identity of volume, we can't help it. Because the hyper-simultaneous will only stay positive unto itself, onto all parts of space nature. There is the phenomenon where is the gaining value of that manifest. For example, in relationship to Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to the rest of space nature is where we have temporary/lasting hyper-positive relationship where our consciousness was before in ancient times, more probably than American history and ancient history/IES as they have been told. And so, for example, too, the evidence of this are with correlation. See, we have courts as modern nations, A through Z, No, if there are only 60 minutes in 1 hour, and if one country has to speak about 60 different countries, there's still hundreds of countries more. And then it's 1 minute for each country. So we can't go at and think of all the names in American history. So they make and keep each age of fact treatment nature, blaming other things, others, and ourselves for what nature is demonstrating are and were the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, acts like predicate acts, including and especially regarding fact treatment nature oriented ones, because those were our sustained and engineered self-value by and as that which is differentially criminally foreign influenced, as all locations, areas, and states of the human identity or volume. Not one capable of defending themselves and of affording the unabridged fact treatment nature that is the actual nature of the law and of the unobstructed voices of the founding leaders who formed our modern nations, all recorded, forced to entertain, individually grouped, and together, all victim reactions, fact treatment nature oriented, that were and are contained sophistication by a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, which is more probable, more practical, and more sane than only fact treatment nature responses offensively and defenses of offensively of entertained nature of war, nature of what is hyper-particulate, for example, so to speak. For example, where and how we have economies entertained and measured, where and how it is exploited to the worst, where and how they prevent free speech from demonstrating where and how that is. It can't be entertained where and how they pretend. No, there was exceptions. There was exception. For example, there was a breaching method. So where and how the law was read, statutes and precedents towards businesses and towards individual rights, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, all that is in defenses of itself, defenses of a breaching screen. That is against correlation nature's actually inherent active and progressive means to all locations at each age. So we need to use phrases like predicate acts to describe properly American history. So we need phrases like in each country's modern history. How could someone teach properly about Chinese or Russian history without using phrases like criminal insidiousness, like criminal and foreign influenced? And the breaching method knew how could people use fact treatment nature, perfection already revealed before it became criminally foreign influenced. Now was that entertained criminally foreign influence because it is through fact treatment nature counters to victim reactions, physically and fact treatment nature oriented simultaneously. So, for example, physics, metaphysics are bound in being generated by with another nature of also of like a bound trinity inside of the trinity, and how it is bound 3 ways and how it is bound 5 ways. as one way, is how it is self-generating. This knew that modern religions were going to be fact, human nature, victim reactions that would have to defend themselves as all locations, areas, and states, locations, identities of names, titles, locations, voices. That only way they could defend themselves is by self-valuing insidious sequence treatments, illusions, and naive uses of other people's names and of their own names, titles, locations, towards sense and sensibilities, towards passions and emotions, making and keeping them one thing, increasingly used to prevent people from speaking about the simultaneous. That correlation uses as evidence, proper evidence reception, and of hypercorrelation, which is distinct from that. Invention can work or not in relationship to what is simultaneous and hyper-simultaneous simultaneously. One of the things that is in demonstration of that is that and how a criminal insidiousness nature, like a wrongdoer, will use and do, including legalized ones, which hundreds of countries are at once. Specifically, again, for the fact treatment nature oriented identity theft / fraud method that has everyone forcing no one to speak about it because of the nature of that which is formal entertained already being and having been differentially criminally foreign influenced, so they could be maintained victims effectively exploited as victim predators effectively engineered, blaming other things, others and or selves, and then needing to hide from and hurt and value and or value hurt all the innocents at all locations, ages, areas that needs to and can has express and voice that which reveals all answers. So we have to take out, physical delusions justified with criminally foreign influence premises treatments that modern nations' identities of formal and informal conviction / opinion natures. We also have to address how that is scientifically observable. How when someone makes an opinion or a conviction, when someone makes an opinion, for example, it is simultaneously as an opinion / conviction, distinctly from how it is a conviction / opinion. The hypernature reveals this. Its differentially constant relationship to itself, being a system other than ours, but as ours. But now as ours, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous from its own. Also as one syntax type that is ulterior from, it's not even trying to be its own anymore. And it's claiming other, preventing short words and their revelations. So the FBI has recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed also with other branches of government. Through time invested, what is actually recorded is collusion between overt criminal enterprises, private ones, hundreds of countries, all private and interbranch, differentially and constantly, even killers and people next to body dumping spots kept needing to hide the same lies, life progressions. Rolls with uses of various natures of courts with sustained, where they tell they have the rights to be with all the bad things, and at all locations. So they've been doing that to keep, since they were kids. The interbranch, all private tied to them, intermilitary, criminally foreign influence with a whole bunch of countries, and shared on and off campuses. So we can't defend our kids over there, and they can't defend their kids over here. And that stays as a breaching method employed. Roll / S, with the complete syntactical possession of of uses of each modern country's names, of individuals, of titles, and of countries, of states, of locations, areas, states, of sciences individually grouped and together further, and then further database relationships simultaneously, private and intercampuses, per the method that effectively, without modern countries, so we have to discern 5 different types we have to discern a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. We have to discern modern countries as archetypal criminal enterprises. We have to discern transnational criminal enterprises, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. How inclusion also with interstates as one, differentially though, because they're with the hyper-archetypal. That which was sophistication greater than, and is sophistication greater than, and more finite. It's immeasurable. How so? Because it is through and fluently self-valued through the identity use method of all locations, memories, fact treatments, time treatments, simultaneously too fast, too slow, everyone inclusion, getting over on forever nature short words. So they have sequence shifts, methods, where and how they're hiding with the individuals grouped and together. The stewards of all locations are actually recorded, communicating, and having communicated. Now this is where they had complete possession over the sophistication, over our science, over our fact treatment. That's why we have that same old stupid logic that prevents exception and exception nature being exploited. Finite particularity, active particularity, and progressive particularity we know is to come. So they're making, so in other words, mandated law is offensively prevented so they can't speculate, and they force opinions and convictions by what the nature of the future will bring relative to what this country is going to have, semiconductors, this, and the resources in this country and stuff like that. To discern how this is true, we have to discern all that they are in collusion with the identity theft fraud method. They make exceptions where people don't even know each other. They're painting each agent, they're at locations lying about the nature of relationships between people, inventing fake relationships between people. The courts and the police forms and political bodies that have only differential understanding of this for reasons that we know, that are discernible, but we can't get through. Everyone blaming other things, others and ourselves, or pretending other people are doing that when we're trying to point that out. So they have Connecticut News companies involved with taking pictures of kids and their parents real quick, and to force roles with a principal child abuser, and and with a teacher who I never had a personal conversation with in my life. I would never root to her or anything like that. Who was involved also with the school when she was a kid. And there was more than one. But this is one I'm pretty sure too. I mean, it's the same, but it was anyways connected otherwise, as one of the stories they told. And they attached me and others to fake words and to fake emails to replace a whole bunch of communications, a whole bunch of answer machine messages and confessions and statements made by the principal child abuser. Because there were also interbranch kids. But this is also where and how we have a whole bunch of different countries. So were and are getting away with it too, because former director of the FBI has roles with a whole bunch of federal criminals, a whole bunch of natures of federal crimes, with the same people before they were caught, and with overt criminal enterprises with our locations, areas, and states. Already they recorded the agencies blaming the real and blaming criminal enterprise, framing them as groups wrong, countering criminal insidiousness nature wrong. I'm not even a lawyer, not police form a criminal. They're offensively preventing people free speech and pretending other by forcing people to entertain abuses of themselves physically, mentally, the identity thefts, frauds. Now these are people, including these are doctors that are personally criminally involved with courts and with their family members, each age of fact treatment. These are also overt criminal enterprises. These are people carrying illusions and there's also a Mr. Reardon was my woodshop teacher. There was another guy who came in, it might have been his name Landry. I never had problems with any of those people. And one nice guy showed me a couple things on, I made a table, how to make it so you cork where you put the screw, and then you don't see it. It looks like a flat top, but there's a screw in there of wood. So in other words, all of a sudden, instead of having a substitute teacher, they had another guy. I don't know if that was the Landry. I know it was the name Landry repeated to me. And there was that location of the location of the wood shops, which is right next to a cafeteria, which was used each year in collusion with people involved with predicate acts at the middle school, at the high school, and at different grammar schools with fact-cheating nature-oriented predicate acts, uses of strangers' names to others, so they'll say they know them. And so they'll remember their names relative to, the identity theft fraud method and the nature of it that is worse than, and while being more finite than, identity thefts and frauds as described by the languages of the law as read. For example, there are revelations when people make treatments about what Jim Crow laws were about, or what witch trials were about in America. And they are measured and maintained by the breaching method and by our own sickly distinctly. And it came first through the breaching method, while it is maintained by the breaching method, but is also maintained through other motivations, natures, needs, interests. That is effectively employing and having employed the value/value progression on off all locations at each age where they know we're going to be because of where and how. See, this employed all identities of sophistication, needing to value being and having been hurt, or all ages of correlation nature, where and how. It has conjunction to the hypercorrelation, where and how the simultaneous nature is every identity's as its own. So we could use what we know is true always, not denying exceptions, and what is not true, to reveal things we haven't even learned yet, and to know them, to discern, and to speak proper why and how. Fake law was pretending passions and emotions other. So they have titles and jobs in response to kids involved with narratives where they keep committing crimes and that are dangerous, and they have roles with car thefts and things like that. This is juxtaposed with where they have acting teachers and departments associated with where and how the hundreds of nations are shared. Suits and ties, counters to it. Identities of sophistication of the law as syntactical possession of a human fact-cheating nature breaching method increasingly ulterior from the native one that was everywhere before scientists became criminally foreign influenced, and self-valued uses of self-valued criminally foreign influenced takes on databases and on the integrity of people's premises treatments, quality of fact treatment, nature treatments since semi-ancient times, simultaneously with where and how people make convictions about research and or what is true and or what is correlatively and hypercorrelatively relevant. Again, was inventions work or not in relationship to the hyper-simultaneous, they are further positive or not in relationship to it. Positive treatments are still being used as criminal and seditious natures of positive treatments, effectively to keep at all locations, areas in the states, effectively keeping and having kept, no matter how powerful a leader gets, collusion with that, with criminal and seditious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments, not just to all locations, areas, and states, at all instances. And it's effectively a breaching method that kept and keeps since before computers the sense and sensibilities of people. Employed breaching screen, maintenance to qualities of fact treatment nature, again, all not just ulterior from the one that invention, positive value nature progressions, action nature is really generated from and by. So they tactically denatured the landscape of across the earth. So nature, knowing that nature would demonstrate negative value nature progressions, action natures, they tactically denatured the sciences, knowing that nature would demonstrate that. And they knew that they found a means to hurt, trick, force, and persuade the phenomenon of countries to blame other things, others, and or selves for foreign attacks upon themselves in collusion with their locations, areas, and states, but mostly through criminal foreign influences. And that was designed to have that countered as fact treatment nature, to invest modern countries individually grouped and together more and more without realizing from some ancient times to the defenses of opinions / convictions of identity treatments, all that can't defend themselves and afford discern what nature and how nature actually demonstrates how we actually think. So there are a whole bunch of people from Wethersfield who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed buildings next to the state capitol are involved with them and with people associated with the fire departments and the Delafair family. And this is also how they abuse boys and girls sickly distinctly, because they know little boys and men, real men, don't want to use girls and women's names. And so they have people using people's names offensively at locations timed with instances, specifically because that's part of the involved evidence perception, identity perception racketeering, worse than war crimes. So we have to address where and how our kids are kept unsafe here and there, because there was collusion, criminally foreign influence, and it relies upon how they blamed the overt criminal enterprises that are and the private ones. In other words, there's something fluent through unrelated people. At each age of correlation, this uses corners of streets because of the fact treatment nature, offensive evidence perception. There's a Scalora family as one of the ones involved with identity thefts and frauds with some various natures of courts and agencies, intercities, also on and off campuses through time. Roles with various natures of predicate acts and uses of them, as people involved with elderly homes and child campuses and locations next to them, also as the ones involved with uses of the corners, and all along the road of Church Street in Old Wethersfield, and at that corner, at corners there, and at the corner of Church Street and Main Street in Old Wethersfield, from there to CCSU, along Wells Road. The corner of Wells Road and Walker Hill Road has all kinds of interbranch sheriffs, judges, prosecutors, people, all kinds of intelligence community with Central Connecticut State University, people involved with dumps, distinct dumps, intercity, Hartford dumps, and New Britain dumps. People involved. We have these police forms, and we have military associated with the Dillon family, further involved with the Principal Child Abusers Campus, and further involved with them offensively forcing such and pretending. No, something where even Connecticut News has roles with this distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously, and switching wire conversations over the phone to fake emails. The NBC Connecticut News do it, and the courts don't provide writing, and they make confessions and demonstrations through time. Since I was a little kid, shortly before the World Trade Center attack, and since, they've been fabricating things into databases, interbranch and at private locations and on and off schools, and just having people say things. So they invest the sense and sensibilities of locations, areas, and states criminally foreign influence. So when I was a kid at schools in Wethersfield, there were already people interschool, even private campuses too. There's collusion between uses of the kids, in other words, each age of correlation nature. And it's hiding behind people's uses of all natures of identity treatments, including the ground, because this is how we are value progression. And this is also a better metaphor than water coming through a pipe, as is internationally accepted for the teaching of electrical engineering and about the relevance of the circuit to these conversations. This is also about positive and negative. So they're making, enforcing, and keeping, and they're keeping each age of fact, cheap in nature, a certain kind of super stupid, where everyone pretends they don't understand that and how there is actually discernible trinity, present, relevant to what is binary value, for example. And that trinity also has discernibly that which is more finite and greater than its value, while being its value as identities. And so English was revealed to teach this, and the proper teaching of it requires understanding of how this is it's a sense and sensibility. It's a nervous system reaction that is tactically ulterior. From these, we are syntactically worse than having entertained. Not one has trained. If we look back on what is actually recorded in cases, you'll see the interbranch and foreign and something through that is effectively using and having used each identity of sophistication, fake sides. All lies. So these are also Wethersfield town offices involved with election crimes. This way, in many places. So we know our nations have needs to keep trying to find means to speak for positive and to establish positive connections between our species. But see, all these are victim predators that are defenses of plans that are all self-valuing, criminally foreign influenced uses of themselves and of location that only haven't been. This is because with this department this part of the FBI or this part of that deals with this, so we send it to that. They're trying to operate as if, they're leaving out exceptions and exception nature, the locations, areas, and states. Stewards of the human science. Science is volume, words, proper. So alpha and omega and yin yang are distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneously in demonstration of the same thing, but only if we used simultaneously. For example, there is one way that what is simultaneous will only stay. Its identity of relationship to itself, only increasing as value to itself, as what is generating, having generated matter, metaphysics, physics, metaphysics, and hyper metaphysics, which is relevant to and as that identity of sequence nature that is not just, but while as the identity of sequence nature that an individual is, that a group is, a group difference, that the species identity of volume is. Those are three distinct volumes. How its volume, one body, the species body, and how the one individual's body, the finite, the overall, which is also the progressive. One identity is coming to / as itself, and it is also simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously coming to, from, as, with, and for itself, where and how it is self-generating. Also proofs of this are existent within the premises treatments and the defenses of the premises treatments of people that are pretending other, where it is relevant, where where things are relevant to the sciences, including the religions and the sports and the arts. Control the hearts. To, that flux of hearts with life. Everything is in demonstration of the 1/3, which is simultaneously 1/5. One is one identity of volumes, identity of relationship to itself, and where and how that gains volume. It gains other values, everything in demonstration of itself. That which really is going to cause positive value, nature, progressions, action, natures, evolutions, fruits, and gifts and means. So they have theory of evolution to keep offensively entertained as formally, to keep measured and maintained by a breaching method, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, effectively, what they maintained all the identities of sophistication, measuring and maintaining through other ulterior motivations, natures, needs, interests, but also that being and having been used remotely. So they couldn't fathom where and how, since everyone was kids. They are effectively maintained self-valued, criminally foreign influenced. So then they needed to hide from and hurt out correlation and value correlation being and having been hurt, because these are people involved with uses of unions and of the locations and the job sites, and the companies are doing it themselves. In other words, because it's all from off the locations, on off all locations, collusion, everyone blame other things, other selves, people reacting to behavior and to instances, but out of sequence, and as passions and emotions that prevent those voices from speaking, distinctly from all locations where they prevent it. See, they're preventing mandated law outside of courts, per where and how self-valued the mayors and other levels of politicians and their kids value, not knowing the extent of where and how everyone there's like classified and declassified per them. And this is where and how they've been making opinions and theories about us and convictions about us. when they bring up how they've been teaching through our schools that George Washington had roles as a slave owner, leaving out how if he spoke up about that, he wouldn't have been entertaining the criminally foreign influenced precedents and statutes that a breaching method had entrenched here before he was born. So they would have realized his actual roles and motivations that were other than just the ones he told. In other words, his actual motivation. In other words, everyone was a fact cheap nature slave, and they had to hide their roles, even fathoming, because it was illegal to even think about not speaking things that were criminally foreign influenced, and simultaneously it was a criminal to speak things that were natural and are needed to be spoken. They were made criminal, just like plants were made criminal. No, now they have all this GMO, with the only people allowed to sell marijuana. And this is also because these are the people involved with those sick natures of drugs that no one even wants to deal with. But they've been using roles with a whole bunch of different countries, roles to countering such the way they do and then defending it, using it to blame other things, others, and so, we're even attaching people to fake uses of drugs and their family members with their own. So we have uses of hospitals across the country that have already been in collusion. We have roles with all kinds of private locations and things that have already been in collusion with the three branches of government, where and how everyone is exception nature. And that's also relevant to what is differential and what is hyper-deferential, that which is actually being demonstrated per our actual needs, to use phrases like predicate acts, and like subjects, and like exceptions, and like exception nature, and relevant to criminal and seditious nature, and to hyper-criminal and seditious nature, that which is self-valued rolls with it. Because the people trying to defend George Washington, they don't answer correctly. They pretend that legitimate is them pretending passions and emotions against who's calling him a slave owner. And they're in collusion against those people who are right, because they're making him tell lies. They're making him a slave. So in other words, and they're pretending people, then we'll have courts decide it. The courts are recording themselves roles at all locations with offensive perception and sequence and worse. Roles, illusions roles, as wrongdoing roles and stuff like that, they're already sustained into roles of predicate acts, and there needs to hide that. And to hide per their uses of where they believe and pretend to believe that motivations are relevant. In other words, there are people through time who sought me out to make confessions demonstrated, recorded. They want and need to pretend it was only their normal, reactions to things. Like, in other words, I don't even know their names. But I know some of them. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and Joshua Stryker, involved with people at UPS, with an Oliveri family, and with Aiello families. And recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by Wethersfield Police and by the DeMoro family. Involved with judges and prosecutors, and with the Cullen family, also were involved with wire crimes and with mail crimes and falsified police reports with them, and rolled with gun crimes, even of men and women, involved with sequence shifts and the mail and drug crimes and drugs and medicines crimes. In other words, they have these people involved with the drugs and the medicines legally and with the military So the military is also involved with the locations next to WFSB in Rocky Hill. That is involved. This is Americans. There are a whole bunch of countries that are involved. There are people from Korea and from, all these different countries involved with a De La Fera family I never had a class with. They have people, and my town's police chief's daughter and her family, her extended family, the Mazzucato family. I was never anything but polite to them. And in other words, they got involved intercities, where how they use confessions of people to keep other people's sense and sensibilities, self-value, identity thefts and frauds, instances, roles that are criminally foreign influenced, and where and how the differentially criminally foreign influence is relevant, because that's also increasingly. And so that increasingly needs to blame on other things other than themselves. The real cause of negative value nature progression is acts and natures, where and how it is discernibly not proper response to it, and identity thefts and frauds involved, reactions to it. Like at the United States Capitol in Washington, they're involved with James Comey and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with Afghanistan on and off Trinity College in Hartford, also with overt criminal enterprises like from people with the name Joey Quest, and people with programs with, even if they're undercover police, people associated with Fred Grisey, who's involved with judges and where they had involvements with boys that were the girlfriends, that were the boyfriends of girls at the same time, but sometimes pretending to like it and sometimes not in the cases, to strangers, where and how they establish themselves appearing not to be police. They were actually recorded criminally foreign influence, and then now they have the means to pretend that they're trying to be appearing to be criminally foreign influence to others. So Adjuster Glavinskis said confessed, demonstrated, recorded his brother. I never met his brother. I don't know his brother's name. Is involved with houses in my area and with corners in my area that are also involved with this Joshua Stryker and people on and off Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. So we have all these different countries. The Afghanistan families, an Afghanistan family also sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm roles with Los Salidos also on and off Trinity College, with identity thefts and frauds instances with judges and prosecutors and former director of the FBI and federal criminals like pension thieves and stuff like that through time, who had their kids also involved with them, with the news media leading up to and in a 2006 district court case. There are a bunch of police on and off forums and families and foreign people as the ones involved with other countries and gangs who have other natures of predicate acts, falsified police reports, roles, identity thefts and frauds instances, and slanders. And their motivations were also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, effectively being and having been used because of how there is different. In other words, they're all needing to hide their lie progressions to all locations, roles with instances, roles with readings of statutes. They never had the integrity to defend the name of any state of any modern country, let alone the country's name. And the relevance of that to the words of each individual, finite. That's where perfection, evolution's fruits and means, gifts come from. Means out of nowhere. So people who all we have to do to get everyone to agree or to know what to do when people disagree is to bring is to not leave out exceptions in exception nature. When people say, well, the economy is criminally foreign influenced. Now, to do that, we have to be able to show what it is relevant to, a criminal enterprise. But in this case, the countries, the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, all that is mixed in there. All that was exploited, how mixed in there by worse, and used remotely. So it also uses their motivations, needing and wanting to pretend the real causes of people for motivations with evil and with insidious natures of positive treatments in inclusion with negative treatments at instances where and how the real causes of the sick nature between people, like shootings with areas, where and how they refer to kids as criminals, and where and how that stays the outcome, and how they keep getting away with it, is because what I caught them doing even between private and public schools and uses of people's names. So they have notions of needs to pretend integrity, that's self-value, where and how there is crazy group and quote, group think, unquote, and hypergroup think, which is additional to while as that, because that was employed. Victim predators, per a method, this method was sophistication here and there. Again, knowing how nature would demonstrate what we would have to demonstrate using other people's names. So that's why too, the sequence shifts are hiding and forcing delayed responses to what they already used the kids of. Interbranch and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people on off body dumping spots through time with different killers relative to different things. As people also recorded uses of corners of streets where they make confessions and statements and uses of other people's names. And other locations that bring stuff relevant to that. It's a method that effectively kept and keeps all formal evidence reception, all formal science /S reception, bodies incapable of defending themselves and affording discerned the actual words of people who use short words properly, because it shows also their sense and sensibility, how being and having been effectively already employed and exploited as criminal insidious natures, relevant to and as actually recorded effective uses of juxtaposed natures of organized crime, where and how and of types of experts then defending themselves in responses to the types of abuses at each age of fact-treatment nature, where and how they use their responses to keep separated and blamed on other things, others and or on selves, that which is actually recorded, which is uses of the distinct natures and methods of organized crime and of child abuses and of elderly abuses simultaneously, and of actual motivations, because also recorded as them pretending not to realize and juxtaposed really not realizing at the same time, but only realizing through where and how they need to be and stay styles of liars. They need to hide what their actual worth was, relevant to their actually, the actual quality of their fact treatments. Our campuses, stewards, including interbranch. So there are 3 branches of government, and exceptions in exception nature come with this. Per how one identity of volume is generating itself by being semi-nature 3 ways, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously from how it is being so. 1 way. And distinctly and simultaneously from how it is being 2 ways, no. How alpha and omega and or male and female, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously our mother, and distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously our father, Boxings, I teach us things. Note how space is simultaneously bigger and smaller than physical matter simultaneously. Note how physical matter is simultaneously bigger, but also simultaneously smaller than space matter. And as existence is, existence/space. Because the identity of what is small and the identity of what is big is invisible, but it's still discernible. Only its semi-nature relationship to the hyper-simultaneous nature is that which is relevant to all things simultaneously. So there is a Leahy family who was also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with a Judge Killian. And there is a Dr. Shamsi Ali who confessed to me over the phone. It's also recorded. I had no conversations with doctor. They kept me there for like 3 days in the night at Hartford Hospital. The first time they brought me there, 3 times for mental evaluation. So they have overt criminal enterprises and private ones involved on my street with confessions and with roles with rape threats. 3 times they recorded themselves involved with rape threats and since proven and further recorded child abuser leaders of the kids, the medical families that had fake conversations with me and about the World Trade Center as doctors. And they have various natures of courts that have been involved with them, with the countries with this. And as ones with the military. I have a number of military sources, intercities, who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with things they don't even understand the extent of, but on and off the state judicial branch offices. Like, for example, a Fianza family is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed even on Facebook. As a stranger sought me out to make confessions about his roles with that location next to the state judicial branch offices, with houses on and off Two-Rod Highway, involved with identity thefts and fraud slanders with Dillon family and with other judges and courts and some mayors and their family members, and ones involved with buildings next to Fox Connecticut News, involved with 2 Mendez police brothers and their family, and two DeMaine brothers and their family, and their neighbors involved also with identity thefts and frauds with them through Time Connected, on off campuses too. Instant connected, relevant instances. As people intercities involved with predicate acts on and off Trinity College and CCSU connected. They have deans also involved switching and forging names with the courts, personally criminally involved. So as victim predators, because now they use the family members of the courts too. Various courts that were leading up to the World Trade Center and since, leading up to a 2006 district court case in Connecticut and other cases that are unrelated, but they have relationships because what is used where they have formal fact treatment nature reception, that is criminally foreign influenced. And that is being and having been exploited, but everyone missed the extent of how. And where there are real reasons how, they value the exceptions to where those are real. People say, oh, it's about money, follow the money. The phrase follow the money is recorded effectively used to maintain self-valued roles with sequence shifts. And with all that actually tied to where and how. They have all these foreign and domestic roles with all these criminally criminalized things and uses of the streets, uses of campuses. So there's a person with the name Landry in the news, and his death and the death of a girl tied to him and families tied to him is associated with the date September 11th. And so this is also inseparable from the Connecticut news media and national news media uses of their Facebook pages, also as roles recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with New Britain Superior Court, with sources and with Hartford courts, with sources of NBC Connecticut News, WFSB, and with that, they have recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with the intelligence community on and off Central Connecticut State University with predicate acts also